Uh, I want to come to the point about net zero. Now, many corporates around the world have been are increasingly making net zero commitments. That's a good thing. Um, in the past, there's always been a little bit of suspicion that net zero commitments are, a little bit of greenwashing. Nobody's really sure of what's going on, etc. But a recent survey of net zero commitments, and just look at the boxes that are highlighted in orange. 44% see net zero as an opportunity to respond to stakeholders. And who are stakeholders in this case? Investors, regulators, employees, customers. So there is pull for, or rather push for towards net zero. 34% see net zero as an opportunity to build resilience against external shock. One of the core components of a net zero commitment by a corporate, for example, is going to be how much renewable energy are you able to access. For that matter, how much are you able to generate on your own? The more you're able to do things on your own that way, the more efficient and resilient you become. 37% believe that net zero will give them a better oversight on supply chain risks and vulnerabilities. The first thing that for you to start doing net zero is you need visibility across your operations. That's not easy, but once you build that up, that helps you not just in your net zero commitment, but in your overall business operations, because you have a lot more clarity of what's going on in your extended supply chain. And 22%, and this is a global study, said that net zero will help in employee acquisition and retention. We don't have yet a robust enough sample size in India to tell you what it's looking like in India, but anecdotally, the fact that all of you are on this call right now, the fact that every conversation that we're having is somewhere related to this, employees increasingly want to join and stay in organizations that are environmentally responsible because they care about the issue. It is an important determinant of talent and where talent will flow and where talent will stay. Hence, I'm no longer talking about shareholder value. I'm talking about stakeholder value as far as a company is concerned. Now, net zero is, we are going towards net zero, but it still needs acceleration. So more companies need to make net zero commitments. Apart from the really big ones, the next layer of companies and progressively the layer after that need to make net zero commitments. You can't just make the commitment and forget about it and say, see you in 2030. We need to be active before that. The governance around net zero, addressing challenges that exist also need to be addressed. Can we go to the next slide, please? So what are these challenges or controversies? As I said, they're either moving inconsistently or slowly on net zero implementation. There is both a carrot and stick out here at play. The stick is increased investor and regulatory pressure on reducing your emissions footprint. The carrot is that, and we heard it from a fairly large multinational. If you reduce your transport costs, the complexity in your transport chain, or reduce emissions in transport, you end up saving money, which is a good thing for a company. It improves your sustainability scores because you've reduced emissions. A combination of these two actually has a direct bearing on a reduced cost of capital for the company. So you're getting benefits immediately from the transport, but you're getting even bigger benefits on the cost of capital when you raise new capital in capital markets. The third thing that is a little complicated and controversial rather is the role of carbon credits. So I make a net zero commitment and I don't make as much effort as I could because it's too difficult or too expensive, too capital intensive. So I just kind of buy my way out through carbon credits. If you approach ESG as I need to comply with something, what is most likely to happen is that you will miss out on big strategic opportunities because your competitors are investing in the technologies that are going to be required to actually meet a net zero goal and accelerate net zero and go even more ambitious than net zero. Next slide, please. which is my last but one slide. I just want to introduce something called the Climate Core Fellowship Program. This is an attempt by us to nurture the next generation of sustainability champions. That visual that you have at the center of the left is not all, some of the Climate Core fellows and the team that supports them. The logos are where these fellows have been hosted by, from Nestle to Zomato to Mumbai Municipal Corporation to Amazon, ITC, McDonald's, Mahindra, etc. Since 2021, we launched it, so we are in year 3 now. We've placed fellows in a number of leading organizations. They join a global community of 1,500 and growing alumni. And the focus is on areas like energy efficiency, climate smart agriculture and food systems. How do you make and how do you accelerate climate commitments and how do you realize them? How do you improve supply chain? A lot of this is driven by technology and innovation, and technology is not always just, fundamental new science. Sometimes it's a software solution. Sometimes it's an innovative change to a manufacturing line. Sometimes it's repurposing of heat that you're generating in a steel plant or other operation. And the last slide is to say thank you for being a patient audience, and let's talk.
I'm a PG student of Banaras Hindu University, and I'm doing my PG in environmental science. But my batch is little confused. So it is in that how can we tackle the industry? I'm sorry, tackle or be a part of our industry in climate or in our field, as there are very less opportunities. Most of my classmates are focusing on PhD and all, but I don't want to study too much. So I want to be a part of a industry. So my question is that what skills we can gain so that I can मतलब मैं उसका part बन सकूं.
Sure. So I can empathize with you when you say you don't want to study anymore. Even I didn't want to study anymore. So I hear what you're saying. Sure, you could do a PhD, and one needs more professors and more PhDs out there. But the gap between the demand and supply of sustainability professionals and environmental engineers is large and growing, and it's growing disproportionately. So there is not a single industry out there that is not needing more and more environmental engineers, sustainability professionals of various kinds, etc. I don't really have a strong recommendation of one industry versus another. Every industry has potential. I think what you should likely do is look at companies out there and try and find, research them, look through their annual reports, look at what's written about them in media, and see who are taking sustainability seriously. And you can easily get a sense of that once you do your research and ask people and check with current employees, etc. And work for companies that take it seriously, people who genuinely know that they need to invest in sustainability, and it's the right thing to do, and it's the profitable thing to do. So that's what my advice would be.
This is Roshan here from the Kautilya School of Public Policy. So you beautifully actually portrayed the demand side, the supply side aspect of climate, and what the other possibilities. From a policy front, do you think there are hurdles or barriers in place, or issues that potentially will be faced by tech companies? And on the global front, from a global trade perspective, do you think issues like, for example, maybe IPRs can be one potential hurdle when it comes to tech?
Yeah, so let's take the first one first. Are there problems with policies? Listen, I don't think there's a single government anywhere in the world which has got every policy perfectly right, and policies need constant improvement, etc. I think the pace at which we move is something that we should we should constantly look at moving faster on. But at the same time, it is also to ensure that you consider the science and the economics of it as you develop these policies. Do we need, for instance, do we need a policy on battery reuse or battery waste management? I'm sure we have some policies. Do they need more improvement? Do they need more resourcing? Yes. I think the bigger issue is how much priority are we giving to the actual implementation of these policies? Because within that priority will often come better and more improved policies. If you came up with a policy and nobody's really looking at it, it's going to remain there, however brilliant or otherwise it is. But that constant improvement part isn't there. On IPR, I'm not as worried about IPR from a legal point of view, but because, you know, everyone's mostly getting there in terms of some basic standards, etc. I think the challenge is twofold. One is, if you think about IPR from a global view, so many countries are subsidizing the development of technology and the buying of new climate tech in their countries that it makes the work of other countries unviable. So when the French president went to the US recently, one of the things he went to do was to complain about the Inflation Reduction Act, because it's a great thing for the US, large amounts of climate investment, but a lot of it is ring-fenced around design in America, make in America, build in America, employ in America, which all makes sense from an American point of view. But suddenly for the rest of the world, it's no longer competitive. The second is, let's assume there's a breakthrough climate, you know, there's a huge scientific breakthrough that happens in climate. How fast would we be to sharing that across the world? It didn't happen perfectly, but the rollout of the COVID vaccine was arguably the only real example where something was developed quickly and was scaled out across the world. We don't have, you know, those kind of mechanisms in place. So it's not so much the legalese, but the politics and economics that will slow us down, is my view.
Thank you.
My question is around two topics actually. The first one is around the funding, right, and how much of amount is spent on R&D. Is there any effort to, or any recommendation from your side to increase that spending? The reason I'm asking that is, so we are in the idea stage for two topics, and we are in TRL1, and we find very few platforms with very little support to help us in progressing this idea to the next stage, right? So often most of these platforms, they seek an innovation which is already in TRL3, but there's a lot of work that goes from 1 to 3, and I feel that this is often a challenge for people like us. So this is my first question. The second one is around behavioral change for climate action to actually work, because it largely depends on society also understanding and trying to comply with these technologies. What would be the right way to bring about this change in the society?
Sure, thanks for those. On the R&D side, I hadn't realized this problem until we started working on it. And I don't know what the solution is completely, but just access to labs, for example, is really, really hard. If you're a startup at, lower than 3, just getting access to a lab, you're typically bootstrapped, is hard. Now, is it enough? No, but if you look at the facilities that Atal Innovation Mission is setting up across the country, and sure, it's going at a certain pace and you need more and need fast, and that's all fine. And I think it needs to happen. But there are increasingly, there is an increase in capacity. We just need a much larger increase in that capacity and a much faster increase in that capacity. So that's one. The second is that there are a number of Indian institutions that are leading in terms of collaboration on supporting the startup ecosystem. IIT Madras is a great example. Looking more broadly, though, the majority of this collaboration has tended to be incubation support in the form of, you can access my lab for X period of time. And don't get me wrong, lab access is important. But what you need to answer your question is much deeper partnerships between, leading Indian research and academic organizations, leading Indian corporates and the government to work on transformational scientific breakthroughs. Carbon capture, for example, is a really tough area. A number of sectors are looking at it, and they're either, contracting with a university in the US. We need those contracts to start coming to research shops in India. On the second question about broader behavioral change, so there's three things, let me put it. One is what happens when, how does consumer demand happen? With fuel prices the way they are, every time you fill up the tank on your scooty or your bike or your car is a reminder to you to say, hey, maybe I should think about the electric version because it's likely to be much cheaper. So those kind of, constant triggers are what is driving the electric vehicle movement. It's not like we built the infrastructure and now, demand is catching up. Demand is pulling the infrastructure to fall in place. The second is, and I'm going to lean on an example from Indore city, and I don't know if anybody on the call is from Indore or has recently been there, but it is sensational to see how that city has become the greenest, they keep winning the award of the Swachh Bharat Award, etc. It is at a mass citizen level that they are doing waste segregation. And the only way the waste management system works is if, at the household level, you're separating, food and plastics, etc. Those changes, in Indore's case, for example, didn't take that long. They just need someone and an effort and a set of organizations and individuals and champions to come together and say, hey, this thing belongs to us and we'll take it forward. So that's the second. And the third is when you get a brand new offering, which is dramatically better than before, consumers foreign line. So Blue Smart is a great example. It's a taxi service in Delhi. It's the Uber, Ola kind of rival. And what they offer is an electric vehicle, but their core proposition isn't electric. Their core proposition is we don't cancel like Ola and Uber, and we happen to be green. Where green is almost like a co-benefit. Your core benefit is you're offering a better solution. The LED bulbs are brighter, they last longer. You spend 1/10 of your previous electricity costs, and they happen to be more environmentally positive. So those are the three kinds of changes that will drive the generating of that demand.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Diksha, do you want to go next?
So I work in the sustainable food space generally, right? And there's a lot of like tech-based, tech-oriented kind of solutions that are coming up for, whether it's alternative proteins or regenerative agriculture or kind of, agricultural integration in a new system for feeding India and feeding the world. And what I have noticed in the sector is that there is just not enough policy impetus to begin with. Of course, also not enough awareness, but being such a huge climate mitigating sector, right? Is there any potential for collaboration to kind of maybe undertake an extensive research in the environmental and economic positive impacts of different ways of growing our food and integrally changing our food systems? So I was just curious to understand if there's any appetite here amongst everybody on this call, and if there's any potential to work on that.
Yes, I'm not going to pretend to speak for everybody on this call, but I will tell you just on the specific area that you're talking about. One of the encouraging trends is the increased amount of investment in agri-tech. By one estimate, 20 unicorns are going to be agri-tech unicorns from India over the next few years. So there's a lot more investor interest in the space, just for the reasons that you described, the scale of the sector, the opportunity in terms of reducing some of the inefficiencies in the value chain. I think one of the challenges that we have is we need agri-tech platforms and the investors in these agri-tech platforms to start looking more closely at farmer incomes and livelihoods and environmental impacts, and not just the savings that you're accruing by removing inefficiencies in the value chain. The savings are important to be reduced, but if you don't address incomes and environmental benefits, at some point in time, you will lose opportunity to generate greater value. So I think that's where we see a particular gap.
Yeah, I mean, and sadly, just to add to that, I think that is like a policy bottleneck, right? Because I mean, yes, you need demand, consumer demand as well, which I guess is increasing, but then that's directly linked to a lack of awareness on what kind of food systems are required to feed the citizens in India, right? So I mean, it's like a double-edged issue, and I feel not enough potential. The potential of it is not understood enough. So, in the climate change and climate action ecosystem, if this takes center stage, which it is in various Western countries today, I feel it will be so much more beneficial to do that. So my question was just to ask if EDF is, and even Climate Corps has this as an issue, has this as a thematic area to work on.
So short answer to that is yes, we do work on climate smart agriculture, and that is an important priority for EDF in the country.
Correct. Okay, thank you for that. I guess I can connect with you as well then.
Sure.
Hi, thank you. First of all, thank you, Hisham, for a well-articulated talk. It was very interesting to know about your priority areas, and also it is a good opportunity for me to tell you something. I am Manish from the Center for Environment and Energy Development, SEED. It is a research organization based in Jharkhand, and it is also a non-profit organization, and I head the R&D of SEED. And while I was going through your priority areas like sustainable livelihoods, responsible business, and market-based mechanisms, and climate technology, considering the mandates of Government of India towards the 2070 net zero ambitions, I think it would be an injustice if we leave coal, basically. So and since I'm working in Jharkhand, it's like one of the most coal-dominated states. I would like to I actually would like to tell that together with the government of Jharkhand, we are the technical partner of the government of Jharkhand on just transition or sustainable just transition, which also includes energy transition. We see energy transition just as a component of the overall just transition, including some other sectors like low carbon development through technology, or livelihood transition, or mobility transition. And I see there is a clear alignment between our objectives and the objectives of Environment Defense Fund, your priority areas. So I have two straightforward questions. First, that what are your views and priority towards coal-related sectors? Because I think there is no issue in accepting this fact that without discussing coal, or without discussing coal phase down processes, we cannot achieve the goals, net zero goals. So what are your priorities? And second, if you have some priorities, how can we approach you? I mean, what's the bureaucratic processes to approach for kind of collaborations or funding, something like that? Thank you.
So on the matter of coal, the government of India has made the renewables energy commitments, right? The 50% by 2030. We don't work on coal. The area that we work on is to try and support the achievement of the renewables targets. So there's, for example, energy modeling work that we do that will support a state government to determine, what is the right energy mix and how they can go more in. So we don't actually work on coal per se. But I would argue that there is so much that's already being done by the government and by a number of other organizations on the matter of energy that you have options. Let me put it that way in terms of who you could speak to.
I mean, my point was because out of different types of energy transition, coal transition is the most difficult because it's also related to the politics. I mean, the politics is directly involved if we talk about coal transition. So as far as the other things are concerned, because whenever there is a coal transition, there will be a separate discussion on livelihoods. So we are like working towards the livelihood repurposing or reskilling of the people involved in coal sector, directly or indirectly employed. So that is why I see there is a clear-cut alignment between your objectives and our objectives. So that made my second question, that how can we approach you? Thank you.
Right. Unfortunately, we don't work on coal per se, but happy to be in touch. Thank you very much.
Just one last question, Hisham. Ritika has asked, apart from the EDF fellowship, how is EDF looking to reduce the gap between the supply and demand of climate talent?
By participating in allegedly master classes organized by Climate Asia, where 30-40 people attend, and each one of them is going to become an ambassador, a lighthouse, encourage another 10 people to attend. So we've reduced the gap by 440 is what I'm hoping in the next 6 months. But jokes aside, I'm glad that you found that funny. But jokes aside, I think the whole idea is to tell people about the opportunity and sustainability and the various things and the various career options that are going to be there.
Hope that answers your question, Ritika.
I'm most certain it didn't, but we'll let it be. She seems to be happy right now, so we'll keep it at that.
Thank you so much, Hisham, for this comprehensive session with an exemplary delivery.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Hisham. Appreciate your time.